hrheadquarters.ie, the podcast.
You're very welcome to HR Headquarters, our podcast today, where we're exploring all things about a thriving workplace. We're diving into employee wellness, what it means, why it matters, and why and how organisations can create environments that support their people in work. And today we're joined by Gráinne Earley from fuelhq.ie. Gráinne, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, before we get into employee wellness, Gráinne, you might just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in Fuel HQ.
Yeah, of course. So I am the Director of Employee Experience Solutions at Fuel. Fuel is an experience and entertainment group. So we primarily kind of do events. We strategize with our clients on their employee engagement, employee experience programs. And we have a few different divisions in Fuel. So I myself work on the employee experience side of the house. We have a brand division as well, festivals, content and production. So yeah, we kind of do a little bit of everything. We partner with our clients to work on whatever elements they require. Some clients might decide to work with us just on content. Some might decide to work on brand experiences. And then on my side of the house, it's a lot of employee experience strategy and looking into, what we can do to make their employee experience in the workplace better.
Well, Gráinne, you're perfectly placed to talk to us today about employee wellness. And of course, it goes way beyond just the physical health or the mental health. It's almost about the culture that fosters growth and support for their employees. So we're going to unpack it. And the first thing I suppose I'll ask, Gráinne, is how would you define employee wellness?
I suppose for me, I really look at it as a full holistic approach. And I suppose that's how I would approach any employee experience program that I'd be working with my clients on. But when we look at wellness, I think it has to encompass all of the areas of well-being. So, you're looking at your mental wellness, your physical wellness, spiritual, nutritional, intellectual, and environmental. And I really feel like when you're looking at employee wellness, you have to look at all of those areas because there may be some employees that may need, focus on certain elements, or they may engage with certain elements, but they may not engage with others. So you really want to look at the whole holistic approach of wellness for your employees.
And for anybody listening, Gráinne, and they're thinking, oh goodness, I hadn't even thought of some of those headings. We hear some of them like work-life balance, but you're mentioning things there, a whole holistic view, like your spiritual wellness. How do you create a supportive workplace that really kind of integrates all of them into one place?
It's a great question because it does sometimes feel like, oh gosh, this could be a huge feat for us to take on. But a lot of it is really just collaborating with the people that are already in the company. Looking at the culture, looking at the work environment and seeing how many of those elements you can really pull into the everyday culture. At the end of the day, you want employees to feel psychologically safe. You want them to feel valued and engaged in their day-to-day. So looking at well-being as a tool really to support that and to help that. So, it may seem daunting that, wow, there's all of these different areas of well-being, but really you can start with small steps. You can look at social clubs that could be looking at, physical wellness and things that you could do outside of work or on your lunch breaks. You can look at if it's a big company, the canteen teams and, what nutritional wellness could we be giving back to our employees? What are we as a company giving back in terms of environmental wellness, the feel good factor for employees? So it's small steps and it's just trying to make sure that we're, I suppose, hitting everything. I think when people say wellness, a lot of the time they think of, oh, it's a gym membership and, I'm going to do some yoga and some deep breathing, in the workplace. But it's just to try and get out of that mindset of that's what it is. There's so many different areas of feeling well in work and feeling psychologically safe and really enjoying your workplace.
And you mentioned, Gráinne, enjoying your workplace. And I know there's great statistics there that would support that when employees look after the well-being of their, or employers look after the well-being of their employees, it increases productivity, it lowers absenteeism. Like it's a kind of a win-win for everyone in the company.
Oh yeah, like 100%. Like the stats are out there and they're crazy. When you look at employee experience as a whole, and well-being is a huge part of that. Like you can see companies that have a really good strategy are 25% higher in terms of their productivity. The retention rates are better. You're looking at, people feeling more connected to the workplace and less likely to go through burnout and things like that. So the statistics are outstanding, really, when you look at it. And it's just so important to bring it into focus and to realize this isn't just about the individual employee, it's about the whole well-being of the company and the culture, and making sure that everyone is happy at work. And a happy employee is going to equal a happy customer, which in turn means a happy business. So it's important for everybody to focus on it.
So, Gráinne, what sort of initiatives have you seen that have made a real impact for a company?
Yeah, there's so many great initiatives out there, and there's companies doing phenomenal work in this space, which is really, really exciting to see. I think people are prioritizing it, which is fantastic. One example I think that stands out to me, a client that I worked with for a good few years, they were already working with a health partner, and I suppose fitness app, or well-being app. So they kind of had two partners in this space already, but they didn't feel they were kind of getting the turnout, or that they were getting the return for what they felt they were putting out there. So we came in and we partnered with both the health initiative and then the fitness app to try and see kind of where the gaps were. So what we came up with in the end was a program that spanned for the whole year. We kind of had it all mapped out in advance, and it made sure that it pulled in those health benefits and those elements that partner wanted to bring in. We had the fitness app elements as well, but we also then saw the gaps, and we saw, okay, we're really not hitting certain areas here. We're not looking at the environmental wellness, we're not looking at nutritional, we're not looking at spiritual. So how can we bring these into the program? And it became a really lovely partnership. It was like a four-way partnership between the two other companies, and then the company itself and us, and it just became a really lovely initiative. It also meant that the employees were seeing well in advance what the timetable or the calendar of events was looking like for them in the well-being space. So it meant it wasn't just stuff that was popping up in their calendars last minute. It meant that they could really map out their year. They could really look forward to different events. They could start to kind of think, oh, great, this is something that I can actually engage with in work, rather than having to do it maybe outside of work on my own time. So yeah, I think collaboration is always key, but it's also sometimes looking at that bird's eye view of what it is that the employees are seeing. It's not just a great initiative, but what are they seeing and what elements are they going to take out of it, I suppose.
And it's really important that the employees are seen to be active in this space, because I know there was some research from Deloitte that said that employees are actively looking for their company, their employers, to be involved in supporting their well-being. And it's highlighting, as you said there, the need for that feedback and that clarity that it is coming up in the calendar and they know it's happening.
Yeah. And it's not like people looking for new jobs and, looking at potential places to work aren't just looking at the paycheck anymore. They really are looking at what else is this company offering me. There's benefits, there's well-being elements, there's lots of different reward and recognition programs. There is, growth opportunities in the company. So people that are looking for potential jobs are looking at that whole employee value proposition and what companies are putting out there and saying they're going to provide to that employee, rather than just the paycheck. So it really is changing, and well-being is definitely a huge part of that.
So there's been an awful lot of talk about sort of mental health, and we hear a lot about stress and burnout and a lot of the challenges that are affecting employees at all levels. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that space and how people kind of integrate that into the well-being of their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to say, in terms of mental health, it's important to have the right supports in place and the right people in place. The spectrum of mental health and what needs people may have in terms of support in that area are so varied and so wide. And, there's a certain amount that your manager can do and that your HR department can do. But sometimes you may need somebody else to come in, coaches or therapists or, mental health professionals to kind of help and support with that. So I think it's definitely important to have the right supports there. Maybe they're not day to day in the office, but that you know who to call or who you can put that employee in touch with if something does come up. But I think in terms of mental health, psychological safety is a huge buzzword at the moment. Everyone is kind of talking about it. And I think it really ties back to that mental health piece. It's wanting people to feel safe in the workplace, that if something is going on for them, that they feel safe, that they can talk to a manager, they can talk to a colleague, that there is supports there. it's also normalizing things like taking breaks, taking time away from your desk, actually having a lunch break. I'm definitely a culprit of that, of thinking, oh, I'll just work through here, and I'll eat at my desk. But all of these things kind of build up, and it's important that employees see that they're seeing leadership also doing these things, and it all comes from the top down. So if you're looking at leaders that are also taking breaks, they're taking time out to go to the gym in the middle of the day, they're making sure that they have a flexible work-life balance, you will then as an employee start to see, okay, that this is allowed, this is expected, this is I'm supported in this way to kind of look after my mental health and make sure that I have a balance in my work life and in my day-to-day job. So I think it's important to have the supports there in place, but to also really showcase what a company wants the culture to be in this space, and to showcase that from the top down as well. Yeah, and the workspace is also another huge part of it. Making sure that there's flexibility in the workspace. Some people want quiet rooms, some people work great with music blaring, standing desks, walking desks, like there's so many different elements, but having that flexibility that people feel, God, if I'm really overstimulated today by a very loud office, I can take myself away and just have some moments of calm and have a quiet meeting room to really focus on some work, because the environment that we're in has a huge effect on our mental health and how our mental well-being is in the workplace. And if we're getting through our day and some of those needs aren't being met, and we come out the other end of the day feeling overstimulated or hypersensitive, or really feeling like that workday didn't go as I'd planned and it's because of other external factors, then that really affects the employee from a day-to-day basis if that's happening on a frequent basis.
And there's just so much there that you mentioned, Gráinne, that I want to unpack. But
Yeah.
one of the first things that I want to ask you about, you mentioned a lot about, it's coming from the top down.
Yeah.
What if you're struggling with a culture that maybe previously didn't take those breaks or hadn't integrated this good mental health culture? How do you really start to reshape from the top down a new work ethic around being, having good physical health, having good mental health, social health, spiritual health? How do you kind of change those embedded cultures that have been taken as okay for a long time, perhaps, and now you're really trying to bring this new change in?
Yeah, like it's definitely something that companies are struggling with, and it needs buy-in. It needs buy-in from leadership. It needs buy-in from the HR teams, from the senior managers, and it can be, a struggle in companies if the buy-in isn't there, because maybe the people on the ground are really trying to get these initiatives to work, and they're putting out these amazing events and saying like, we want you to all be a part of this. But if those employees are seeing, oh my God, my manager doesn't want me taking that time off, and I know that he's going to look at me differently, or she's going to say something to me if I do this, then there's no point in putting these initiatives in place. So it is a struggle, but it really does need that buy-in. And I think at the moment, like you were mentioning, there's so many statistics out there to show and to prove why this is so important, and how it's important for the employees, but how it's a huge benefit to the company themselves as well. So I think having that business case to show to leadership and to managers, to show this is important and we need your buy-in. And once that buy-in is there, then it all starts to get a lot easier to kind of trickle down. And I think also having that open communication. I mean, I know that I've been called out on it from some of my team members. They've said to me, oh, it's great to see you taking a lunch break today. And I really had to, take a step back and reflect on that and say, God, like, is that what my team are seeing? That I'm sitting at my desk at lunch, and in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I'm just going to get through this, get a little bit extra done. But what they're seeing is that I'm not taking that break. I'm not taking that time out. So maybe they shouldn't either. And I've obviously not verbalizing that. I'm absolutely happy for everyone else to take their lunch break. So sometimes as a leader, you also have to reflect on those things, and you have to like understand what you're putting out there. You may not even mean it. So like, I'm very conscious now that I do step away from the desk and I do go for a walk, or I sit down and have lunch with somebody that I maybe haven't talked to in a while, and that I try and showcase what I want them to feel as well. I know that the managing directors of our company are always really heavily promoting that as well. They'll pop out to the gym in the middle of the day and they'll come back refreshed and feeling great, and jumping into a meeting full of energy. So I think it's important for people to see that kind of thing happening. And the biggest struggle is getting that buy-in initially. But once the buy-in is there and the communication is there, and you have a safe environment where you can call people out and say, hey, you haven't, stepped away from your desk. Why don't we go and take 10 minutes and walk around the block or something like that? It starts to become the norm, which is really important.
And you mentioned something earlier, Gráinne, and it was about being sensitive to the needs of your employees. Some people may like a quiet space. Some people
Yeah.
like the music. Some people like the gym. Some people like to walk. How
Yeah.
can you ensure that the wellness initiatives are inclusive and they're fair and they cater for the diverse workforce? And there's not somebody who's maybe going to the gym all the time and they're getting out. And then there's somebody who doesn't go to the gym, but they're kind of not getting the same benefits from this kind of wellness structure. How do you make sure that everybody's happy in the space?
Yeah, I think that's why I tend to focus on that full holistic view and all the different areas of wellness because like you say, some people might not want to jump on a spin bike during their lunchtime, and maybe that's not wellness to them, and maybe taking 10 minutes out and doing some meditation is, or maybe doing something and giving back, doing something, a sustainability, exercise or a charity piece, or something like that might be what really, brings them joy and gives them well-being. So I think it's all about balance. It's about looking at the employees as individuals and understanding that this cannot be a one size fits all. There has to be a variety in the well-being offering. There has to be initiatives that will appeal to all, and that you make sure that something like a quiet workspace will work for some, and some other people will really like the hustle and bustle of the office, and that's okay. And there's different meetings or different roles may require different things. So I think it's really just finding that balance for everyone and making sure that you're not just going down one avenue of well-being. And I think that's what a lot of companies did kind of start initially, going, oh, we're going to pay for your gym memberships, and and isn't this great? And obviously that's fantastic, and God, it's brilliant that if a company wants to pay for your gym membership, but some people may not be comfortable going into a gym, and some people may just feel they need something else. So it's really finding that balance, and I think looking to make sure that you're offering something that is inclusive and that everyone can pick and choose from the elements that they feel appeal to them.
And if somebody's listening in and they're thinking, we really need to integrate a wellness strategy into the company culture, maybe we're falling a bit short, we're missing the mark here, where would you start? Would you look at kind of best practice and maybe a company that's doing it really well? Would you get feedback from the current employees? How would you encourage a company to really engage in a meaningful way into this space?
Yeah, I think the feedback, when you've hit the nail on the head there, understanding who your employees are is the key. Every organization is going to be different. So you can look at a best practice, or someone that you think has really, really nailed it, but it could be a completely different style company to you. So things may not be the same, for them. I always kind of feel like when you're approaching anything like this at the start, and it is just taking one step at a time, you really need to look at like insights and the immersion into, okay, why are we doing this? Like, ask yourself, the tough questions initially. Why are we doing this? What are we looking to achieve? What are the employee needs? What are the business goals? What areas are we strong in at the moment? Because there may be areas that you're really, really strong in. And what are the weak areas that we need to improve? Are there any enablers or inhibitors that are in the company at the moment? And I think finding out a lot of this information is going to come from doing research, talking to your employees, doing surveys, maybe having impartial interviews with some people that you feel might give you that data, to understand what your employees need and what they feel is lacking. And then from there, once you really have the insights and you've immersed yourself in kind of understanding what it is and what you want to get out of it, then you get to go and do the fun stuff, and look at, developing that program and ideating on what we can bring to our employees and getting excited about it. But I really do think the key is listening and understanding who your employees are and what they want. And I think the other area that is lacking a little bit at the moment in this space is the accountability. So it's all very well to get excited about an initiative like this, and then, but you can't just dump this on HR or the comms team or the, social clubs. It has to be, like I say, there has to be buy-in from everyone, but also it has to be something that is in the company strategy, that everyone is, gunning for this to happen and really wants it to happen, and that who's accountable and who's going to really bring you through this and make sure that it gets to the finish line of where you want to go.
Yeah, it's an interesting task because you want to avoid navel gazing and just doing it for the sake of doing it. As you said, you have to really know, why are we doing this? And if we want to maintain a healthy work-life balance for all of our employees, we know it's going to affect productivity and kind of retention of staff and things like that. But if you kind of notice that perhaps a particular team or a group are sort of, you know, maybe burning out or they're working too hard and it's from the top down. How do you kind of change that culture? Is there a way of sort of bringing people along on the journey in a meaningful way and kind of showing them this will have benefits at the end of it, but it's kind of difficult for them to buy into it initially because it's not the way they previously did things?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of it comes down to really putting that information in front of them, putting the stats there, putting a business case. I always say, you know, people get excited about these things and they say, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, absolutely do that. But then if they think all of a sudden this is going to cost money and this is going to take time and this is all of a sudden it doesn't seem so exciting anymore. So I think you really have to put the data in front of people like that to ensure that they're also bought into it and that they understand what the value of this is. And if this is a company strategy and it's a company mission, that everyone is bought into that. That if the company is saying that this is something that we are backing, that we are behind all the way, it's important for every manager, every senior leader, every director in the company to be behind that. And if there is a certain team whose manager isn't allowing that, it will come to the surface very, very quickly. And then somebody does need to step in and say, right, you know, you're not following the missions that we've set out and that we've promised our employees, and we need this to work. So, you know, we need you to kind of toe the line, you know. And it is difficult. Like there is no easy fix, and there will be some people that will think, nah, this isn't how we did it in the olden days, and you know, this isn't necessary, and my way of doing things is better. But at the end of the day, if it's a company value or a company mission, or this is a strategy that a company wants to roll out in 2025 or 2026 or whenever it is, at the end of the day, you don't always agree with everything that a company decides that they want to work on, but you got to get behind it as an employee. And you will soon see that in something like this, once everyone is behind it, that's when it really starts to grow and you really see the benefits. It can be from the simple things, like it doesn't have to cost a fortune to kick it off. You know, you can do so many amazing social clubs. You know, like I know in Fuel we have too many social clubs. I can't keep on top of them all. But there's something for everyone, you know. So there's a golf society, there's a running society, there is a sewing society, there is movie club, there's theater club, there's a dog walking society. You know, there's so many different elements that will bring people together in their workplace, as well as just focusing on well-being. This is really about connection and people feeling connected again. And if I'm getting out for a walk with 5 of my colleagues and their dogs this week, it's going to put, you know, a bit of a pep in my step. And if someone else is maybe going for, you know, a swim down the harbour with swim club, that's going to bring them connection and bring them some sort of joy. You know, these things don't cost a fortune, but I think you need to show it and show the benefits, and then the buy-in is automatically there, and you'll see that more and more things will pop up then that people are like, let's do it, you know, and they get behind it, which is exciting.
It is very exciting, and it can be also daunting if you're just starting this. Does it generally fall to kind of HR professionals who are introducing these kind of new wellness initiatives to create this inclusive culture where wellness is kind of front and center and almost becomes unconscious? Then it's just part of what we do every day. It's part of who we are. But initially, is it generally kind of spearheaded by the HR professionals?
Yeah, like I love that unconscious word. Like that's exactly what we want companies to get to, that this is unconscious and that they live and breathe this and it's in their culture. But yeah, in terms of who it sits with, it's quite a tricky one at the moment. And we're in this kind of flux at the moment where there's a lot of new titles and new departments popping out. There's, you know, the HR department, there's the people and culture department, there's the work environment department, there is the employee engagement department, employee experience. There's a lot of these new departments or titles that are kind of popping up. And I suppose a lot of those companies, it's because they are trying to get somebody or a team or a group of people accountable for this element, which is great. Primarily, it would have always sat with HR, but I do feel like it's very difficult for a HR team to roll this out on their own. You know, it needs a comms department to have buy-in, it needs leadership buy-in, it needs people that are involved in the social clubs, it needs people that are involved in maybe the employee resource groups that may be in the company. You know, it really does need a collaborative approach. So yes, there may be accountability from a HR side to get this over the line, but I think it shouldn't just sit there in terms of the actioning of the work. And it is exciting to see that there is all these other departments and titles popping up, I suppose, at the moment. People and culture and workplace wellbeing, and there's lots of people with these amazing titles now, which are going to be accountable for these programs. But again, it can't just happen in isolation. It needs collaboration between all departments and leadership as well.
It just shows, Gráinne, that employee wellness, it just goes so far beyond just physical, mental health, emotional well-being. It's a real part of the culture that fosters growth, support, inclusivity, and just happiness and joy and pride in your place of work. What final words would you have for anybody listening, just from your vast experience, if they really want to get behind this? Have any words of wisdom to leave us with?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to just start, take a step on the ladder. I know it can seem daunting, but if it's something that you really feel passionate about and that your company is lacking, just take a start and take the first step, see what you can achieve by maybe setting up some of these social groups. Speak to HR, speak to social committees, see if there's a leader that could advocate for you. It is going to have to start small, and eventually, hopefully, the ideal is that this is embedded in your culture and that going forward, this is part of your workplace. But yeah, I would just say take that step. Don't be daunted, and understand that every small piece that you're doing is actually going to have a really, really big impact on the employees and on the workplace. So it's just important to get going and make sure it's a part of the culture in your company.
I love that. Just take that step. And I've no doubt that we'll be chatting to you about this again, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's such a vast area and it's something that we go back to time and time again because it's a constant conversation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for
And it's
now, we'll
never
leave it
moving.
there. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Gráinne Earley from fuelhq.ie. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much. It's been great.
HRheadquarters.ie